The old house groaned around us. It was Leo's grandparents' place, a rickety two-story relic at the edge of town where the woods began to swallow the sky. We were supposed to be having a sleepover, 5 of us huddled in the dusty attic, me, Leo, Maya, Chloe, and Sam. But honestly, sleep was the last thing on anyone's mind. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes like a trapped animal trying to get in. Leo, ever the storyteller, had spent the last hour spinning tales of ghosts and ghouls that supposedly haunted this very house. His voice was low and creepy, making the shadows from our single flashlight dance like bony monsters on the slanted walls. A dare was hanging in the air, thick and heavy like the dust motes swirling in the flashlight's beam. It started as a joke, a silly suggestion from Chloe to pass the time. "You know what they say about old houses," she'd whispered, her eyes wide. "They have the oldest mirrors." We all knew what she was talking about. The legend, the one every kid hears at a sleepover but is too scared to actually try. The legend of Bloody Mary. Sam scoffed, trying to act tough, but I saw the way his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses on his nose. He called it a stupid baby game, but his voice cracked just a little. The challenge was officially thrown down by Leo. He pointed a dramatic finger at the far corner of the attic, where a tall, standing mirror was draped in a ghostly white sheet. "I dare you," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but carrying across the room with chilling clarity. "I dare all of us. Let's see who's brave enough to summon her." A nervous energy crackled between us. It was one thing to tell scary stories, but it was another thing entirely to invite the scary story into the room with you. My heart started to beat a little faster, a tiny drum of fear tapping against my ribs. We were just kids, fooling around, right? What was the worst that could happen? I should have said no. We all should have. We should have laughed it off, told Leo he was being an idiot, and gone back to eating pizza and playing video games downstairs. But we didn't. The dare was like a hook, and it had snagged every single one of us. The thrill of it, the sheer, terrifying possibility, was too much to resist. We were teenagers after all, and we thought we were invincible. We looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between us. We were going to do it. We were going to summon Bloody Mary. We stood up, our sleeping bags rustling on the wooden floor, and began our slow march toward the shrouded mirror in the corner of the dark, groaning attic. Leo reached the mirror first. With a theatrical flourish, he yanked the sheet off. A cloud of dust puffed into the air, making us cough and wave our hands in front of our faces. The mirror underneath was ancient. It had a dark, heavy wooden frame, carved with strange, swirling patterns that looked like snakes or thorny vines. The glass itself was the creepiest part. It was cloudy and streaked with age, and a long, jagged crack ran right down the middle, splitting the reflection into 2 distorted halves. It looked less like a mirror and more like a captured piece of a dark, murky pond. It seemed to swallow the light from our flashlight rather than reflect it. We gathered around it, our shoulders bumping in the cramped corner. Maya brought the candles, 3 thick, waxy pillars she'd found in a drawer downstairs. She carefully lit them, and the attic was suddenly filled with a flickering golden glow. The dancing flames made our shadows stretch and writhe on the walls behind us, making them look like silent, lurking figures that were watching our every move. The air grew still and heavy, and the only sounds were the sputters of the candle wicks and our own shallow, nervous breaths. I could feel the goosebumps prickle on my arms, a cold dread seeping into my bones despite the warmth of my friends beside me. "Okay," Leo whispered, his voice trembling just a bit, betraying his confident act. "Who's going first?" We all looked at each other. No one wanted to be the first. No one wanted to be the test subject. The silence stretched on, filled only by the crackle of the candles and the frantic thumping of my own heart. It felt like we were standing on the edge of a cliff, daring each other to jump into the darkness below. The reflection in the mirror was eerie. Our faces looked pale and stretched out, our eyes like dark, hollow pits. The crack in the glass made it seem like we were all broken and pieced back together wrong. Finally, Sam stepped forward, pushing his glasses up his nose. "I'll do it," he announced, his voice a little too loud in the quiet room. "It's all fake anyway. Just a stupid story." He was trying to convince himself more than us. He took a deep breath, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists at his sides. He stared into the cracked mirror, at his own distorted reflection staring back. The candlelight flickered violently, casting long dancing shadows across his face. For a second, it looked like his reflection was smiling when he wasn't. I blinked, and the illusion was gone. It was just Sam, looking terrified, about to do something incredibly stupid. Sam stared at his own warped reflection in the ancient glass. He took a shaky breath, the sound echoing in the dead silent attic. The air suddenly felt colder, as if someone had opened a window to a winter night, but all the windows were sealed shut. A shiver traced its way down my spine, cold and sharp like an icy finger. Sam closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he opened them and stared straight into the mirror. His voice was a strained whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "Bloody Mary," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and wrong. The candle flames dipped low, almost going out completely. He took another breath, this one more ragged than the last. He was shaking now, a visible tremor running through his whole body. He didn't look away from the mirror, his eyes locked on the cracked, distorted version of himself. "Bloody Mary," he repeated, his voice a little louder this time, a little more desperate. As the second name left his lips, a low groan echoed from somewhere deep within the house's old bones. It sounded like wood splintering, but it was deeper, more guttural. Outside, the wind stopped howling completely. The sudden absolute silence was more terrifying than the noise had been. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting. I wanted to scream at him to stop. I wanted to grab him and pull him away from that horrible mirror. But I was frozen, my feet glued to the floorboards. We all were. We were trapped in a bubble of fear, spectators in a nightmare we had willingly created. Sam's face was slick with sweat in the wavering candlelight. He looked like he was about to be sick. He opened his mouth for the third and final time. "Bloody Mary," he choked out, the name catching in his throat. And then it happened. The instant the third name was spoken, all three candles extinguished at once, not flickered out, not blown out. They just died, plunging us into absolute, suffocating darkness. A collective gasp escaped our lips. The only light was the faint silvery moonlight filtering through the grimy attic window. Then we heard it. A sound from the mirror. A soft, wet scraping sound. It was like fingernails dragging slowly, deliberately, down the other side of the glass. Sam let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure, undiluted terror. Chloe screamed, a high-pitched shriek that was cut short. Leo fumbled frantically for the flashlight, his hands shaking so badly he kept dropping it. The scraping grew louder, more insistent. It was coming for us. We had called her name, and now she was here. Leo finally got the flashlight to work, its powerful beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. He immediately pointed it at the mirror. For a terrifying second, the mirror was just a mirror. It reflected the five of us, our faces pale masks of horror, crowded in the attic. But then, something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Our reflections were moving with a slight delay, like a bad video feed. When I took a step back in fear, my reflection stayed put for a heart-stopping moment before jerking backward to match me. It was unnatural. A violation of the laws of physics that made my stomach churn with a primal fear. We stared, mesmerized and horrified, as our reflections began to act on their own. Chloe's reflection, the one staring back at her from the cracked glass, slowly began to smile. It was a wide, grotesque grin that stretched her mouth too far, a smile full of teeth that looked too long and too sharp. But the real Chloe wasn't smiling. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her face as she stared at the monster wearing her face. Leo's reflection tilted its head at an impossible angle, its neck seeming to snap, yet its eyes remained fixed on the real Leo. My own reflection remained still, but its eyes were completely black, two empty voids in the glass. The scraping sound returned, louder now, and we realized it was coming from inside the mirror. It sounded like something was clawing its way from the dark world behind the glass into ours. In the wavering beam of the flashlight, we saw a dark, shadowy shape forming behind our twisted reflections. It was tall and thin, a vague silhouette of a woman with long, stringy hair. It had no face, just a dark smudge where features should be. But we could feel it watching us. We could feel its hatred, a cold and ancient rage that radiated from the glass and washed over us in suffocating waves. Sam was closest to the mirror, and his reflection was the most terrifying of all. It was no longer mimicking him at all. While the real Sam stood frozen in terror, his mouth agape in a silent scream, the Sam in the mirror was laughing. It was a silent, convulsive laughter, his shoulders shaking and his head thrown back. His eyes, just like mine in the reflection, were black pits of nothingness. He raised a hand and pressed it against the inside of the glass, and from the shadowy figure behind him, another hand, long and skeletal with dirty, broken fingernails, reached out to place itself over his reflection's hand. They were coming through. The air in the attic dropped to freezing. I could see my own breath misting in the flashlight's beam. The laughter from Sam's reflection stopped. The figure behind him in the glass seemed to solidify, becoming less of a shadow and more of a solid physical presence, trapped just behind the silvered surface. The laughter was replaced by a low, guttural whisper that seemed to come from the mirror itself, a sound that slithered into our ears and made our skin crawl. It was a woman's voice, raspy and dry like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. It whispered a single, horrifying word: mine. Then, the impossible happened. The mirror rippled like water. The crack in the center of the glass glowed with a faint, sickly green light. The skeletal hand, the one that had been pressed against the inside of the glass, began to push through. It emerged from the mirror, not as a reflection, but as a real, solid thing. The glass stretched around it like rubber, not breaking. The hand was pale and grotesque, covered in grave dirt and dried blood, its long, yellowed fingernails ending in sharp points. It reached out from the world within the mirror and into our attic, into our world. The hand shot forward with unnatural speed, its fingers like bony talons. It lunged for Sam. He let out a final, terrified scream as the hand clamped down on his shoulder. Its grip was like iron. He was paralyzed, his eyes wide with a horror so profound that no sound came out of his mouth anymore. The hand was real. I could see the way its grimy fingers dug into the fabric of his t-shirt, the way his body jolted from the impact. It was a monster from a nightmare, made real and tangible, and it had its claws in our friend. We were no longer playing a game. We were fighting for our lives. We snapped out of our frozen terror. Leo and I lunged forward, grabbing Sam's arms, trying to pull him back. Maya and Chloe grabbed onto his legs. We pulled with all our strength, our feet slipping on the dusty floorboards. But it was like trying to pull a tree out of the ground by its roots. The grip of the thing in the mirror was impossibly strong. Sam was being pulled forward, inch by agonizing inch, towards the rippling surface of the glass. His face was a mask of sheer agony and terror as he was dragged closer and closer to the portal we had so foolishly opened. A desperate tug of war began in the flickering flashlight beam. The four of us against the one monstrous hand. We screamed, we pulled, we dug our heels into the floor, but it was useless. The thing from the mirror was stronger. Sam's body was being drawn into the glass, which stretched and warped to accommodate him. First his arm, then his shoulder, disappeared into the murky depths of the mirror. It was like he was being swallowed by quicksand. He didn't scream anymore. He just made a horrible gurgling sound as the mirror's surface reached his neck. His eyes, wide with a terror I will never forget, were locked on mine, pleading. We gave one last, desperate heave. For a moment, we thought we had him. We pulled him back an inch, but then the thing in the mirror pulled harder. A sickening, wet, tearing sound filled the attic as Sam was ripped from our grasp. He was pulled completely through the glass. For a single, horrifying instant, we saw his face pressed against the other side of the mirror, his mouth open in a silent scream, before he was dragged away into the darkness within. Then he was just gone, vanished, as if he had never been there at all. The hand and Sam were gone. The moment he disappeared, the mirror snapped back to normal. The rippling stopped. The sickly green light in the crack vanished. The surface became smooth and solid glass once more. Leo, still holding the flashlight, shone it on the mirror. It was just a mirror again. It reflected the four of us, our faces streaked with tears and contorted in horror. It reflected the empty space where Sam had just been standing. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of the hand, no sign of anything. It was just an old, cracked mirror in a dusty attic. The only evidence that anything had happened was the deafening silence and the empty spot where our friend used to be. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, panting and sobbing, staring at the mirror. It was over. But Sam was gone. We ran. We scrambled down the attic stairs, tripping over each other in our haste to get away. We didn't stop until we were huddled together in the brightly lit kitchen downstairs, as far away from the attic as we could get. We didn't know what to do. How could we explain this? Who would ever believe us? We called the police. We told them our friend had wandered off, that we couldn't find him. We lied. because the truth was too insane. The truth was that our friend had been stolen by a mirror. The days that followed were a blur of police questions, worried parents, and search parties. Sam was officially a missing person. They searched the woods, the town, everywhere. But we knew they would never find him. He wasn't in this world anymore. The four of us were haunted. We couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sam's face being pulled into the glass. I heard that horrible scraping sound. I felt the unnatural cold. Chloe refused to be in a room with a mirror, covering every reflective surface in her house with blankets. We were broken, traumatized, and alone with our terrible secret. About a week later, the nightmares got worse. I dreamed I was back in the attic, standing in front of the mirror, but this time I was alone. I would hear a whisper from the glass. "Join us," it would say. Then a face would appear in the mirror. It was Sam. He looked pale and strange, but he was smiling. "It's not so bad in here," he would say, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. "We're waiting for you. All you have to do is say her name, just 3 times." I would wake up screaming, drenched in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to face it. I crept into my own bathroom, my hands shaking. I turned on the light and stared at my reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror. My face was pale and thin, with dark circles under my eyes. I looked haunted. I just needed to see a normal reflection. I needed to convince myself it was just a dream. But as I stared, a movement behind my reflection caught my eye. It was him. It was Sam. He was standing right behind my reflection inside the mirror, his hand on my reflected shoulder. He gave me that same empty smile from the nightmare. His voice wasn't in my head this time. It came from the mirror, a faint whisper that chilled me to my very soul. "She's not done," he whispered, his eyes black and empty. The ritual worked on all of us, everyone who was there, everyone who even whispered her name. "She's just collecting us one by one. She's coming for you next." My blood ran cold. I had whispered her name that night in the attic just like the others. The curse was on me too. So listen to me. I'm telling you this for a reason. Never ever say her name. Don't even think it. Because if you're near a mirror, she can hear you, and she's already behind